Welcome to Module 2 of the Skipper's Ticket Theory Revision Package. This module is all about rules and regulations on the water. We've said that the skipper, by law, is considered responsible for the vessel and its passengers. You may have heard the phrase, "you're the skipper, you're responsible," thrown around, and it means just that. The skipper is responsible for all that's happening on the vessel. The Department of Transport, Fisheries and Water Police enforce recreational boating rules. So things like adherence to safety gear requirements and speed limits are enforced by these authoritative bodies. Let's talk about mooring areas. Mooring areas, like the one pictured, contain many swing moorings, and there's different types of moorings across the world and across WA indeed. We have moorings that are owned or rented by individuals where they park their boat permanently. We also have moorings that are considered courtesy moorings, so the public can use these moorings for usually a short period of time to enjoy the sights and sounds of the specific area. With a mooring, only one vessel is allowed to tie up at a time, no matter the size of the vessel. You must also follow the posted size limits, as noted on the side of the mooring, as different moorings have different size requirements. This is an example of a courtesy mooring you might see across Perth, and typically these courtesy moorings might have a 4-hour time limit and potentially a 12-metre vessel length limit, but it varies depending on the mooring. Let's talk about speed restrictions. In general, you cannot travel in a way or at a speed that causes a nuisance or a damage, meaning you cannot create a lot of wake near a riverbank. You must drive in a sensible fashion. On the water, the magic speed is 8 knots. 8 knots is the magic speed that we'll refer to a lot. We say that an 8-knot speed restriction applies when you come within 15 metres of another moving vessel. So if two moving vessels are passing each other, they must keep a distance of 15 metres and they can travel at any speed. But if they cannot keep a distance of 15 metres and come within 15 metres of each other, they must travel at a maximum speed of 8 knots. 8 knots also applies within 30 metres of a vessel freestyling, meaning if two personal watercraft or jet skis are freestyling, an 8-knot speed limit applies when they come within 30 metres of each other. In practice, this just means that when the vessels, or the PWCs, come within 30 metres of each other freestyling, they stop freestyling and drive away from each other. Recall that freestyling is driving in a way where there's frequent course changes and with unpredictable movement. So when jet skis are going really fast and changing direction and doing lots of tricks, that's considered freestyling. 8 knots also applies within 50 metres of a moored or anchored vessel, a swimmer, a jetty or a wharf, a riverbank or low water mark. Now there's lots of data to remember there, but there's a simple way to remember it. 8 knots also applies when travelling under a bridge, through a mooring area or in water that is less than 3 metres deep. As I said, there's a much easier way to remember all this data. 8 knots is the magic number. If there's a speed limit or a speed restriction, we'll always be talking about 8 knots, unless we're talking about 5 knots, but that's usually signed in the specific area. 8 knots is our magic number. 8 knots applies within 15 metres of just about everything except the moving vessels, which is 15 metres, and except the vessels freestyling, which is 30 metres. So 8 knots, 50 metres from pretty much any notable item, except moving vessels, 15 metres, and vessels freestyling, 30 metres. Let's talk about accidents and obstructions. Nets, pots, and buoys are not allowed in channels, and you cannot tie to a marker. So you're unable to drop your crab pots inside a channel, and you're unable to tie to starboard, port, lateral, cardinal markers. You cannot tie to a navigational marker, like in the picture below. Only accidents resulting in serious injury, death, or substantial damage to the vessel must be reported to DOT within 72 hours. So accidents that don't involve these things, they don't need to be reported to the Department of Transport. Skippers must help vessels in distress unless it is unsafe. They are unable or marine rescue has taken over. So a skipper has a responsibility to, if monitoring their radio on channel 16, to respond to a mayday or a pan-pan call if they are able and if they can. Let's talk about alcohol and drugs. Skippers cannot have a blood alcohol concentration exceeding 0.05. You also cannot skipper under the influence of any illicit substances or drugs. As a rule of thumb, it's a good idea to not mix the water with alcohol. However, there is a restriction of 0.05, which is the same restriction that applies when driving a motor vehicle. Let's recap what we've learned. What is the skipper responsible for? The boat and everybody on board. And as we flash these questions up, try and answer them yourself before we show the answer. How many vessels can use a single mooring? Only one, no matter what size they are. 8 knots applies within 15 metres of a vessel underway, another moving vessel. 8 knots applies within 30 metres of 2 vessels freestyling. Within 50 metres of a swimmer, the speed limit is 8 knots, that magic number of 8 knots. 8 knots applies 50 metres from jetties, riverbanks, moored and anchored vessels, swimmers. Remember, 8 knots applies 50 metres from just about any notable item in the water. The speed limit under a bridge is 8 knots, magic number 8 knots. What accidents must be reported? All accidents that result in serious injury, death, or damage making the vessel unsafe. So all types of minor accidents do not need to be reported. Do skippers legally have to help vessels in distress? Yes, permitting they are able to and it is safe to do so. The only cases where you are not obliged to assist a vessel in distress are, we just spoke of these, it is unsafe to do so or assistance is already being provided. The blood alcohol content of a skipper must be less than 0.05, the same as a motor vehicle. Let's now talk about right of way on the water. When underway on the water, you must give way to the right. Let's have a look at this example here. 2 vessels are approaching a jetty. The current is travelling on this page from the right side of the page to the left side of the page, as shown here. Which vessel must give way and which vessel can go first? Well, the vessel A, can go first because he is travelling up current, upstream. The reason for this is because vessel A has much more control of his vessel as he is driving against the current. The appropriate way to dock at a jetty, if possible, is going to be to come from down current. So A is set up on a much more logical approach than B. Vessel B is coming down current, so is being pushed by the water, therefore has less control of their vessel. Vessel B should turn out away from the jetty and come behind vessel A and complete their docking at the jetty once vessel A has completed it. So in this case, vessel A has right of way and vessel B gives way because vessel B is coming downstream and vessel A is heading upstream. What about in this example? In this example, we have vessel A towing a water skier back to the beach and vessel B towing a water skier away from the beach. Vessel B has yet to depart, vessel A is obviously still moving. Who has right of way? Well, if we apply some common sense, we would say that vessel A has right of way because vessel A can't stop here without the skier sinking because the skier must be moving to stay afloat. Vessel B will wait on the beach until vessel A has returned, and once vessel A is back on the beach and out of the way, vessel B may move off. So in this case, vessel A has right of way and vessel B must give way. What about in this example? Both boats are approaching the jetty from downstream, heading upstream. One is closer, one is further away. So which vessel gets to go first? Well, let's apply our common sense and remind ourselves that the vessel closest to the jetty has right of way. So in this case, vessel A gets to go first and vessel B must give way. Vessel A has right of way, vessel B must give way. This is because vessel A is closer. Therefore, if vessel B went first, vessel B would cut off vessel A, and it could create a dangerous situation. One important thing to note in right of way is that if two boats are leaving a jetty at the same time, the boat first underway has right of way. So if the boat beside you leaves 3 seconds before you must wait until they have departed the jetty before leaving, as this is the safest thing to do. Let's talk about pollution. You cannot discharge noxious substances, rubbish or chemicals from your vessel under any circumstances. If you have an accidental oil or noxious substance spill, you must report it to Department of Transport. If you do not report an oil or noxious substance spill, you may face a fine. Let's recap. Who has right of way when two boats are leaving a dock at the same time? The first one underway. Two vessels approach a jetty, one from upstream and one coming from downstream. Who gives way? The vessel approaching upstream gives way, so the vessel coming from downstream heading upstream gives way. Two vessels approach a jetty from the same direction. Who gives way? The vessel furthest from the jetty must give way because the vessel closest to the jetty has right of way. Can you dump noxious waste when offshore? No, you cannot dump noxious waste at any time. When do you have to report an oil spill? Always, or you may face a fine. Let's talk about vessel registration. Any vessel with a motor or capable of having a motor must be registered. So this includes a kayak with a motor mount, but excludes a large sailing boat with no motor or motor mount. Any vessel with a motor or capable of having a motor, meaning a transom with a motor mount, but no motor, indicates that vessel needs to be registered even in the absence of a motor. Yachts without a motor don't require registration. Tenders under 3.1 and 5 horsepower, which is most tenders, don't actually need a unique registration. Now, don't worry too much about that data. Let's just remember that tenders don't need unique registration. They instead display the registration of their mothership. This is the placement of registration on a boat. We have our registration numbers placed midships above the waterline, meaning approximately halfway down the vessel and above the waterline, so high enough on the side of the boat where the numbers are above the waterline. And these numbers must be placed on both sides of the vessel. This is a registration label, and a registration label must only be placed on the port side of the vessel, not on the starboard side. The registration label on the port side goes beside your registration numbers. Registration numbers go on both sides. The registration label goes only on the port side. The registration label simply shows that your registration is current and paid, and changes year to year. Your registration numbers are like your number plate for the boat, and they don't change. This shows the placement of registration numbers and stickers across a different variety of boats. In the top left, we have a motorboat where we see the registration, and in WA this is 2 letters and 3 numbers traditionally, placed midships on both sides of the boat. So these registration numbers would be displayed on the other side of the vessel too. We can also see a small registration sticker or registration label beside these numbers, as we can tell we're looking at the port side of the boat. If we were looking at the starboard side of the boat, the right side of the boat, we would not see this registration sticker, but we would see these registration numbers. On a yacht, that is a sailing boat, the placement of registration is slightly different, with the registration numbers being towards the stern of the vessel, still on the sides, but towards the stern of the vessel. The same rule applies for the registration label. It is only on the port side, and it is beside the registration numbers. On a tender, you'll see that the registration number is the same as its mothership. So this smaller boat is used to get to and from the beach when this larger vessel is at anchor. Therefore, it is this vessel's tender. The registration on the mothership is identical to the registration displayed on the tender. It does not need a unique registration. Let's talk about diving, skiing, and personal watercraft or jet skis. This is a dive flag, and it must be displayed when there is a diver in the water. If you see a dive flag, you must keep 50 meters from the dive flag. If you are unable to keep 50 meters from the dive flag, you must travel at the dead slow speed, which is an idle speed. When you're diving at night, on your boat, you display a red, white, red set of lights in this configuration, all on top of each other. If you're diving at night without a boat, so diving at night where you swim out from the shore, you must tow above you a flashing orange light. To go water skiing, you need 3 people. One is the skier, one is the skipper, and that skipper, we recall, must be over 17, because you must be over 17 to tow a water skier, and an observer who is over the age of 14. The observer's job is to face the skier, so the skipper looks forward to look for any oncoming objects, boats, sunken branches, anything like that. The observer faces backwards to feed information to the skipper about the skier. So the observer provides the skipper with information about the skier. Importantly, the observer does not look forward and the skipper does not look back. This is the safest approach to skiing. Freestyling is when you operate a vessel or a PWC, which is a jet ski, in an unpredictable manner with frequent course changes. You cannot freestyle in speed restricted areas 30 meters from another PWC or 50 meters from a vessel or person in the water. So you must keep your distance when freestyling. Let's recap what we've learnt in this section. Which vessels need to be registered? Try and answer these questions. All vessels with an engine or capable of having an engine. So that's vessels with an engine or with a motor mount. Do tenders need to be registered? No, they display their mothership's registration if they're under 3.1 meters, which is most tenders. On a powerboat, where does the registration numbers go? Midships above the waterline on both sides of the vessel. What colour is a dive flag? Blue and white. When diving from the shore at night, what light do you need? A flashing orange light towed, floating on the water. Who is required to go skiing? A skier, a driver or skipper, and an observer. Does a skier need to wear a life jacket? No, but it is recommended, but not required. What does the observer do on a boat? The observer is present during skiing and faces the skier to provide updates to the skipper. What is freestyling? Freestyling is driving a personal watercraft or jet ski in an unpredictable manner with frequent course changes.